Helena wasn't the kind of woman people noticed at first glance. Modest clothes, hair pulled back, eyes that carried stories instead of sparkle. She walked into that upscale dealership like someone entering a sacred space. Not to buy, but to remember. Her late father used to talk about that exact model, as if it were poetry on wheels. What she didn't expect was to become the subject of cruel whispers and judgmental stares. They looked at her like she didn't belong. One salesman even chuckled under his breath when she asked about the price. "We don't do window shopping here," he muttered. Her heart sank, not because of the insult, but because that car was tied to something deeper, a memory of love, warmth, and old Sunday drives.
Hello, I'm going to tell you this incredible story. Put on your headphones for a better experience and sit comfortably because you're going to be moved. Remember that to receive new stories like this, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell. Without further ado, let's get to the rest of the story.
In moments like these, emotional story meets reality in painful ways. Yet Helena didn't flinch. She offered a soft smile, thanked them politely, and walked away. That kind of grace under fire? It's rare. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a shield. Little did they know, this touching story wasn't over. Because some real story moments begin when everyone else thinks the chapter has ended. Outside the dealership, she paused to look back one more time. Not at the car, but at how easily people forget kindness. Her fingers traced the edge of an old photo in her pocket. Her and her father beaming in front of a similar car. The world had moved on, but she hadn't. And maybe that was okay. Not all stories need to be rushed. You see, Helena wasn't driven by money. She was fueled by meaning. That's the difference no one in that showroom seemed to understand. They were selling engines and ego. She was searching for a heartbeat on four wheels. And that's something you don't learn in sales training. It's something only those with heart ever really feel. There was one employee, though, a young man in the corner who seemed uncomfortable with how things played out. He didn't say much, but his eyes spoke of quiet disapproval. Even in places built on status, there are flickers of humanity. Helena noticed, and although she said nothing, she tucked that moment into her heart like a small ember waiting for flame. That night, Helena didn't cry. She brewed tea, opened a book, and carried herself like someone who'd just weathered a storm with grace. The dealership staff would forget her by tomorrow, but her story? Oh, that emotional story was just getting started. Because across town, someone very powerful had been waiting for a reason to act. And now he had it. Leonardo Velmont wasn't the type of man you'd find flaunting yachts or gold watches. Billionaire, yes, but quieter than most librarians, ironically. He found joy in silence, peace in pages, and love in the unlikeliest place. A bookstore under warm light and the scent of old pages. That's where Helena stood, lost in a worn-out novel, unaware she was about to rewrite his entire emotional story. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. Their connection wasn't flashy. No grand gestures, no paparazzi chases, just conversations that felt like walking barefoot on warm sand. Leonardo loved how Helena never tried to impress. Her simplicity, her values, her touch of nostalgia, it was grounding. In a world of people chasing status, she was a breath of fresh air. And that, to him, was priceless. That night, when she shared what had happened at the dealership, she didn't speak with anger. She told him the real story with calm dignity, like someone used to being misunderstood but refusing to grow bitter. Leonardo sat in silence, listening not just to her words, but to what they meant. Then came that mysterious smile, a soft rebellion rising behind kind eyes. "Tomorrow, you'll have your answer." Helena blinked. "What do you mean?" But Leonardo didn't elaborate. He kissed her hand, handed her a bookmarked copy of The Little Prince, and simply said, "Get some rest." That was his way, a man who let actions echo louder than any press release. She didn't know it yet, but the same emotional story that had broken her heart was about to become a legend. Sometimes, love doesn't roar. It whispers. And in those whispers, promises are made. Promises that reshape the narrative. that elevate touching stories from private moments to public redemption. That night, Leonardo wasn't planning revenge. He was planning restoration, not just of Helena's dignity, but of a forgotten truth. Real worth isn't dressed in designer clothes. What Helena didn't know was how far Leonardo's influence reached. The automotive world whispered his name with reverence. He could make or break brands with a single statement. And yet, he never used that power until now. This wasn't about a car. It was about the woman who made him believe again. And her real story deserved a chapter no one would forget. As dawn approached, Helena stood by the window, tea in hand, watching the quiet city prepare for a new day. She didn't expect much. But life has a curious way of rewriting touching stories just when we think the ink has dried. And across the city, a convoy was already assembling. Engines humming, hearts aligned, and justice quietly approaching. It started with a low rumble. Then the polished chrome caught the morning sun. One by one, luxury vehicles slid through the streets like royalty on parade. At the front, a rare black Rolls-Royce, timeless and quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. Pedestrians turned, cameras lifted. Something big was happening, and the emotional story behind it was about to unfold. Out stepped Leonardo, elegance wrapped in purpose, with Helena by his side. No red carpets, no grand announcement, just a silent walk toward the dealership that had bruised her dignity the day before. This wasn't revenge, it was revelation. The city didn't know it yet, but they were witnessing one of those rare, real story moments that redefine what respect looks like. The manager, all smiles and clueless charm, rushed forward. "Welcome, sir. How may we assist you today?" He beamed, completely unaware of the irony. Leonardo didn't respond right away. He looked around, scanned the room, then gently said, "I'd like to purchase that model. The one your team felt was above her pay grade." And the temperature dropped. "But," Leonardo added, his voice as calm as ever, "this transaction only proceeds under two conditions." Every ear tuned in. First, Helena handles it. Entirely. Second, anyone involved in disrespecting her yesterday is to be dismissed immediately. You could hear a pin drop. It was no longer just a car sale. It was a touching story turning into poetic justice. Gasps rippled. Staff looked at each other in disbelief. Helena stood frozen, unsure whether to cry or smile. Leonardo wasn't just making a statement. He was rewriting the narrative. And this real story wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about every quiet soul who's ever been underestimated because they didn't look the part. The same salesman who had mocked her now stared at the floor, their laughter long gone. Meanwhile, the young employee who had shown a flicker of decency stood quietly in the back. Leonardo noticed, because true power, when wielded by the right hands, doesn't just punish, it uplifts those who dared to do right, even when it wasn't popular. As the keys changed hands, Helena's fingers trembled slightly. This wasn't about material things. It was about recognition, validation, and turning pain into purpose. The car would be hers, yes, but the real victory was deeper. And just like that, with cameras flashing and jaws dropping, the emotional story of a woman once ignored became impossible to forget. Leonardo didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When he turned to the crowd and introduced Helena as his fiancée, a silence fell heavier than any thunderclap. "She's not just the woman I love," he said. "She's my future business partner." Every person in that showroom suddenly realized they hadn't just insulted a stranger. They had disrespected the woman who now stood at the helm of something much bigger. A real story was unfolding before their eyes. The plan was already in motion. A nationwide chain of automotive museums, showcasing the legacy of classic cars. Helena's dream, built from her father's stories, and now coming to life. And she wasn't a token name on the paperwork. She was the mind, the heart, the soul behind the vision. That day, justice didn't come like a storm. It came like sunlight breaking through the cracks of an old, cold wall. The staff who mocked her? Gone. No second chances, no drawn-out explanations. Not because of vengeance, but because respect isn't optional, it's foundational. and when it's violated, action must follow. Helena didn't ask for this consequence, but she stood with quiet strength as it happened. This wasn't just an emotional story anymore. It was a lesson. Then came a moment no one expected. Leonardo called out the young salesman who had tried, in a timid, almost invisible way, to show her kindness the day before. "You saw her," he said, even when others didn't. A single nod from Leonardo, and the man's life changed, promoted to manager of the very first museum. A touching story inside another. Kindness rewarded when least expected. Helena's eyes welled up, not from pride or power, but from something deeper. That feeling of being seen, of having your voice honored even when it trembles. It's something no amount of wealth can buy. As Leonardo handed her the car keys, she gasped. The license plate read, "For the woman who sees true worth." A simple gesture that said everything. Photographers capture the moment, but no camera could fully grasp what was happening. This was emotional restoration. Public apology wrapped in poetic elegance. Helena wasn't there to gloat. She was there to witness the world shift, even if just a little, toward fairness. And that's what made this real story resonate with so many. It felt like justice finally got the mic. As the doors closed behind them and the crowd slowly dispersed, Helena whispered to Leonardo, "I still can't believe this is real." He smiled, kissed her forehead, and replied, "This is just the beginning." And indeed, the next chapter was already calling, one that would turn their story into a symbol far beyond that dealership's walls. Months passed, and what began as humiliation had bloomed into legacy. The grand opening of the first museum wasn't just an event, it was a statement. Helena arrived not as someone seeking approval, but as a woman who now understood her own power. Reporters rushed in, curious about the mysterious figure who once walked out of the dealership ignored, and now returned celebrated. It was the kind of emotional story that made even skeptics pause. Helena didn't hide her roots. She embraced them. When asked about her rise, she smiled and said, "It's not about how much you have, but who you are when no one's watching." That simple truth echoed louder than any headline. It struck a chord with people who had ever felt invisible, overlooked, or dismissed. Her real story had become a mirror, and people saw themselves in it. The museum was filled with classics: Mustangs, Beetles, Impalas, each car holding its own touching story. But none touched more hearts than the one gifted to Helena. People gathered around it like it was sacred, not because it was expensive, but because it represented something rare, a love that lifted, a life that transformed, a quiet woman who proved them all wrong. Social media lit up. Young girls posted about Helena, calling her the woman who walked with grace and spoke with her eyes. Older women shared their own stories of being judged, only to rise later. It wasn't just a success story. It was a human story, and that's why it mattered. Real recognition born not from fame, but from truth. Helena and Leonardo didn't chase the spotlight, but followed them anyway. Invitations came pouring in. Interviews, features, brand offers. But they chose carefully. Their mission wasn't profit. It was purpose. To preserve heritage, inspire humility, and remind the world that behind every simple face, there may be a touching story worth hearing. The museum chain expanded, but the first location always held something sacred. Visitors came not just for the cars, but for the spirit of the place. It felt honest, kind, like walking into a place where value wasn't measured by your clothes, but by your character. And in every corner, Helena's fingerprints remained. Quiet, steady, unforgettable. And while the crowds admired the exhibits, Helena often slipped away to a small room at the back, her father's favorite book resting on a shelf next to the original photo of their Sunday drives. There, in silence, she remembered how it all began, how pain led to purpose, how love restored dignity, and how the next emotional story might already be waiting outside those doors. So, tell me, have you ever been judged just by the way you look? Have you ever wished for that one moment where the world sees your true worth and regrets underestimating you? Helena's emotional story isn't just about a car or a billionaire. It's about justice, dignity, and the kind of love that shows up when no one else does. What would you have done in her place? Would you have walked away quietly or returned with grace and power like she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And hey, if this touching story moved you even just a little, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notifications. We have more real story moments coming, and you won't want to miss what's next.